my achievements, have to look up in the rafters for banners. Less of a dying breed, blame it on my ancestors. 2 sets ahead, I'm playing chess while you playing checkers.
All right, welcome, Dr. Eric Cole. Thanks for joining me on the podcast.
Pleasure to be here, my friend.
Awesome. So why don't you kind of, give the audience a little bit of a high-level career background, some of the stuff that you've done, places you've been, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. So I'll sort of take you on a little journey, but to do that, we really have to sort of go back in time to 1985. And I know that not that far ago, 40, 50 years, but the reality is 1985, there was no computers. There was no cell phones. There was no tech. So it's really a crazy, crazy thing when you look at my career, because I started before any of this tech existed,
right?
Before any of these things happened. So 1985, I'm 15 years old. I was born in 1970. And I'm always fascinated with how things work. So I was going to major in architecture. You look at a bridge, you look at a building, it's pretty amazing feat of technology that it was built, especially it was built in 1930 or 1940 with the text. I'm just always amazed of how things work and operate. And a friend of the family said, Eric, everything's moving to computers. Why don't you major in computer science? So I'm going to New York Tech, majoring in computer science, and being honest with you, hated it because it was basically engineering on steroids. So I had to take physics. I had to take calculus. I had to take Fortran.
Right.
Anybody that loves physics and calculus, mad respect, but crazy, right? That's just, I like the programming side, not that technical. I'm a math guy, but not that analytical side. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, this is just not for me.
Right.
So I'm a big fan of listen to your inner voice. Right? It guides you and directs you. And it's the weirdest thing. I can remember it like it was yesterday. It was a Thursday afternoon. I'm sitting in Fortran questioning what I'm doing here, like with my life, because this is like the most boring stuff on the planet. And something said, go to the co-op office, the intern office, the office in which they try to get you work and get you experience. So I get out of class at 3:30. It's starting to rain. And the co-op office is 20 minutes away, a 20-minute walk. So it's like you always get tested, right, by the universe. But I'm like,
right.
No. It was like this obsession came over me that I had to go today. So I walk there, I show up at the co-op office, half drenched because it was raining, and walk in at 4:05. They close at 4:30. And I walk in and they're like, who told you? I'm like, who told me what? They're like, you must be here because somebody told you. And I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. They're like, every 2 years, the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency. Yes, that's CIA, right? From Tom Clancy movies.
Right.
They come to campus every 2 years and they recruit. And they're coming tomorrow and we have 3 open slots. Do you want one of the slots? So I'm like, sure. Now, here's the cool thing. When you don't understand a situation and you don't get stressed, you actually perform much better. Like in hindsight, when I realized I'm interviewing with the CIA, I should have been freaking out. But because I was young, naive, and didn't really understand it, it was like, oh yeah, I'm just going and talking to people. So like, I really didn't understand how critical and what a big opportunity this was. So I walk in just super chill, super relaxed, not stressed out at all. And I go through this interview process with them for 20 minutes. And they give me a packet of basically that I have to fill out for a background check, which basically meant they wanted me to go into the CIA. To make a long story short, that got me into the CIA, which got me into cybersecurity, which basically set the entire trajectory for not only my career, but aligning with my purpose, which I believe everyone's on this planet for a given purpose. And my purpose is to secure cyberspace. It's to make cyberspace a safe place to live, work, and raise a family. And so I joined the CIA in 1990. Now remember, World Wide Web wasn't developed till 92, and Google wasn't a company until 1998. So I sort of joke with everyone that Al Gore says he created the internet. I'm like, I didn't create the internet, but I actually helped build it. And
Right, for sure.
I was actively involved with protocols and routing and those things. So I started working at the CIA in the 90s. And then 92, 93, the web comes out. We start doing and developing communication systems. And another thing that I'm big on is smart people know the right answer. Brilliant people ask the right questions.
Totally agree
So
with that.
I ask a question in a big meeting in the auditorium at CIA headquarters that transformed my career. And that question was this. They're talking about moving these communication systems to the internet, using the internet as a way to do covert communications. And the question I ask is, how do we know if they're secure?
Right.
How do we know if they're protected or locked down? And they look at me, they look around, nobody knew the answer. And if you don't know an answer to a question, you're volunteering. So they basically said, Eric, we're going to give you 100K and 6 months, figure out how to make applications secure. Now, once again, 1990, right? 1992 timeframe. So different time and place than today.
Yeah.
Well, the reality is, and I think everyone listening knows the answer, there's no way to prove a system is secure. You can only prove it's not secure by breaking into it. So that sort of launched my career, where I started off as a professional hacker or ethical hacker or white hat hacker or whatever term we use today, where basically I focused on how do we exploit, break in, compromise systems. So my specialty is looking for and identifying weaknesses.
Okay.
Where are there weaknesses or vulnerabilities or patterns that can be exploited? And then how do you position them in a way to use them as a benefit, not a weakness? So I basically went into hacking and was hacking for 5 to 6 years. One of my specialty areas is actually in the nuclear sector. So I actually did a lot of work with securing and protecting nuclear reactors, and then left the government and really recognized that I like helping and securing. And guess what? Hacking doesn't help. Right? Hacking as itself alone just hurts and exploits. But when you hack for a purpose to increase and improve security, now all of a sudden it becomes, instead of a negative, it turns it into a positive. So I've been focusing on defensive solutions and building and selling companies in the space on helping to protect and secure infrastructure in a way that actually enables businesses, is not disable it. Because my big theme is everybody thinks cybersecurity is an obstacle, a roadblock, like we're the doom and gloom folks. I sort of always shock people because my whole philosophy is 2 things. 1, cybersecurity is a business enabler, and cybersecurity is fun. And it's actually fun and exciting. Like I go at the security operations center and I'm like, why is everyone so doom and gloom and down and like slamming Red Bulls and everything else? It's like, let's crank up the tunes and let's have a little fun, right? Why can't cybersecurity actually be something that's enjoyable? Why not losing the sensitivity of the problem and the severity of the issues, right? Yes, lives can be lost, identities can be stolen. It's a serious, serious problem. But if we can enjoy it and make it a positive, it's going to be more easy to implement as opposed to making it a negative and forcing it upon people.
Right, for sure. Now, what do you think? Because like you said, cybersecurity is somewhat of a new category, especially down to the school level. So for some context, I'm actually just started working with the Canadian Nuclear Lab. So it's cool that you brought up that
Oh,
sort of
nice.
nuclear position. Yeah, and we're trying to understand how do we get students engaged with operational technology alongside cyber, but cyber in general, so that they come out of school already engaged in the field, right? And we're trying to figure out how to bridge that gap. Why aren't, like you said, why aren't people more excited about this?
And I think the big reason is a lot of people think that cybersecurity is a technical problem. Right? So like with me, when I got into cybersecurity, it was really computer science, and computer science was engineering, and engineering was mathematics.
Right.
So I think, and I don't know why, but a lot of people are so scared of math, right? When you start saying calc and differential equations and everything else. Like people freak out, and it's a separate topic, but I'm like, they're just numbers, right? They're friendly. Like math is fun, but people just associate it technical. And to me, cybersecurity, if you really understand it and you really embrace it, you go beyond the technology, you go beyond the business, and really cybersecurity is a people problem. It's
Right.
how people operate. And at the end of the day, most people are social. We love to interact. So if we realize that cybersecurity is just teaching people how to interact and operate in a way that benefits and enhances their life instead of hurting it, then I think all of a sudden people get excited about it, because now all of a sudden it's a fun thing that's helping and increasing people's value, as opposed to sort of being that roadblock or the people that always say no.
Right. And I've run into, situations like that in the field where, companies or corporations or government for that matter can build these great cyber infrastructures, but you have people using these infrastructures at the end of the day, right? And if they're not on board or trained properly, you can have the greatest stack in the world, but insider threat becomes a problem, and just negligence in general, right? So you have to
Yeah.
get everybody on board outside of the technology as well, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, a great example, which is happening right now, and to me, it's no fault of anyone. It's just the reality of the situation. But what's happening now with Signalgate, where I'm sure you're following, where you have government officials that were using Signal, and a outsider got added to a chat and got information they shouldn't have access to. And I don't know about you, I can relate to that. I
Yeah.
mean, I've done that. I mean, I don't know how many times I've gone in and I'm texting on my iPad and I'm in the wrong channel and I send the wrong message to the wrong person. And sometimes it's pretty embarrassing, right? If you're going in and you're sending sort of a joking message that was meant for a friend, and you send it to a business associate or somebody else. So I think we can all sort of recognize that, hey, technology has gotten so far where we've got so embraced with functionality that we lost sight of security. We forgot, and we were never trained on security. So to me, it's one of those things where instead of sort of pointing fingers and blaming people, we need to step back and say, how do we re-educate everyone on how to properly use this technology and how to properly secure and implement it? Because the reality is, it's like we were given technology and nobody ever told us about the risks or exposures, and we assumed it's 100% safe.
Right.
So if you look at most executives, most people, most parents, most kids, whether they admit it or not, they're operating, when they grab their phone or their iPad or their computer, they are operating from a mindset that this is secure and safe, and I can trust everyone that I'm communicating with. And that is so far from the truth.
For
So the
sure.
problem is the premise that we're basing our assumption of using technology is so flawed that we have to basically break it down and recreate a new model that, hey, technology has a lot of benefit and a lot of value, but it's not safe, it's not secure, and we need to use and operate it in a different manner.
Right. I think that's kind of where, the whole zero trust theory comes from, right?
Yep.
Constantly re-authenticating, because you will have human error, right? That's completely unavoidable. There's always going to be that aspect of it. Um, Another side to that coin, though, there's a technology that I've been working with, an emerging one, that kind of fits into this bill, that allows, to not let the onus sit on the person. It's a technology around behavioral biometrics. So
Yep.
basically, regardless of your password, it's checking your cadences, the way you move around with the keyboard, things that are unconscious. So, whether employees are properly putting passwords that, should be what they are, not 123 password, whatever the case may be, they
Yeah.
still have a protection level there because of the things that are going on behind the scenes. So I'm a fan of technologies that kind of wrap that into the bundle as well.
Yeah. No, I love how you're thinking, and we're totally in alignment. And one of the things I use a lot is there's sort of this phrase, common sense is not only common practice. Like we do crazy things. And to me, it's so true when you go into digital. Things that people would never do in the real world, they do in cyberspace.
Right.
I mean, it's crazy. Like just real quick, and then I'll get back to your question on the biometrics. But like you mentioned, zero trust. In the physical world, we live our life zero trust.
Right.
If you think about it, if your neighbor's house gets robbed, your house doesn't get robbed. If my wallet gets stolen, your wallet doesn't get stolen. So we practice this concept of zero trust when it comes to the real world. If somebody walked up to us on the street, if after this podcast, I go to get a bite to eat and I'm walking down the street and some random stranger comes up to me, gets in my face and goes, "Give me your name, give me your phone number, and give me your email address," I would be like, "Get out of here." Like I'd be scared. I'd be defensive. I'd probably look around to see if I could get help. I maybe look at calling 911. Like that would be a high alert item. I would remove myself from the situation and nobody would do that because it's not socially acceptable. But guess what? If I'm surfing a website that I've never been before, a total strange website, and all of a sudden a pop-up appears that says, "To continue, give me your name, email address, and phone number," we're like, "Cool, let's do it."
Right.
Why are we doing like that's not logical. That's not zero trust. That's not how we were raised to behave. But for some reason in cyberspace, all logic and reason are thrown out and we assume everyone is trusted. And we give away our information for free. And it's crazy. So it's like we just have to take the mindset of the real world and put it in cyberspace. And then to what you said, I love analogies and learning. If you look in the medical space, what makes the medical space work is exactly what you said, anomaly detection. What do doctors do? They look for anomalies. They take your blood work and they compare it against other people's blood work and they look for anomalies. Like if your red blood cell is high, if your PSA is high, if your testosterone is high, right? Those are all indicators. The medical community is all about anomaly detection. Look at normality and look for deviations from normality. So that's my whole approach to cybersecurity is what you said, like with biometrics and bioauthentication is, what if we could learn and understand how you operate, how you type and how you behave, and then look for anomalies? Because here's the reality. If somebody breaks into my computer and they're going to go in and access my data, download my data, and steal my data, they're going to operate and behave differently than how I normally operate.
Exactly.
So if we could build a baseline, and this is where I think AI should be heading, and I don't see it heading that way, and it concerns me. But to me, AI should be about not going in and becoming my digital twin to replace me, but AI should be going in and understanding how Eric operates. And when somebody operates differently from Eric, it goes, "Hey, you're not Eric," and shuts them down.
Right.
I mean, to me, that's where we should be heading AI. And I feel like we're going in the wrong direction where we're using it now as a replacement to humans as instead of a way to protect and secure humans.
For sure. No, I totally agree. And you know, this technology that I'm working with does a very similar thing to what we're speaking about. It kind of looks at the speed you type and the pressure you put on the keys. That way it can tell, you know, even with the correct information, this is no longer Eric Cole. The second piece to that I find really cool is from an insider threat point of view, let's say in a secure office, I'm already logged in. That's great. And it was me. So I've been authenticated, but then I leave my desk and I don't lock my computer before I leave, right? This is a huge part of insider threat is people taking opportunities. Well, even though I'm already logged in, because this new person is now interacting with the keyboard differently than I would, it can still block access, right? So these are these kind of underlying pieces of technology that AI can help with that can really push us forward to that area, right?
Exactly. And that's the name of the game that you're hitting the nail on the head is it's all about how do we make security integrated into our lives as an enabler? And sort of a great example that is very similar to what you said is a big problem in cybersecurity is hospitals, where emergency rooms, let's use that as an example. Doctors need access to data real time. If there's a patient that is in serious condition that doctor cannot spend 2 minutes logging into a computer to access their records.
Right.
But we have this issue with cybersecurity where they go into an ER and they see a computer that has access to all of the patient's information, logged in and accessible, and the doctor walks away for a minute to work on the patient, and then they come back. The problem is cybersecurity comes in and goes, that's a risk. You have people walking around the hospital. Anybody could log into the computer. Anybody can access the information. So the old school way of doing cybersecurity is, oh, we need to lock the account after 15 seconds of inactivity. We need to have two-factor authentication. We need to add all these controls in place. They're only focusing on the security and protection of the data. They're not focusing on the job the doctor needs to perform.
Right.
So now they put these measures in place, and what happens? The doctor now is coming back. They have to work on a patient, but now they have to log in, they have to authenticate, they have to do all this thing, and it basically interrupts and impacts the ability for them to do their job. So
Right.
now when security negatively impacts the business, unfortunately, security is wrong, and it creates this conflict in the industry. So one thing I look at is I go in and say, wait a second. When that doctor is taking that patient into the ER for an emergency operation, and they're wheeling them really fast to get them in there, they don't have to stop at the door, because guess what? They have a badge that has a location that automatically opens the door when they get within 10 feet of the door.
Right.
So I'm thinking, what if we take that same security we solved in the physical realm and we add it to a computer? So what I do now with hospitals is now a doctor doesn't have to log into a computer. When they get within 3 feet of the computer, it logs them in based on their badge and their biometric information. Then when they walk away, it automatically logs them out. So now we have a high level of security, a high level of protection of privacy, but we're enabling the doctor to do their job more effectively, as opposed to being a roadblock or a hindrance.
Right. Very cool. I think that is probably something that needs to be paid a little bit more attention to in the cybersecurity spaces, is how are we enabling the industry along with the defense, right? Because if you're a great defense, but you block the ability to do their job, like you said, then that product is just not going to be used, and then we lack security, right?
Yep. Yeah, the analogy I like to give is in high school, I played baseball. What position is the most powerful position on the baseball field?
I would say probably. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm curious what you would say.
I would either I may have a little bit of bias, but I would say shortstop, probably either that or the pitcher.
Exactly. That's what most people would say. But here's the reality. The shortstop doesn't know what's going on in the outfield. The pitcher doesn't know what's going on at second base. You know who has the best visibility? The catcher. Because the catcher is seeing what everyone doesn't see. They can see the entire field. So when the shortstop is looking at the batter, the catcher can see the person on second base, how far off the base they are from the shortstop. So they can tell the shortstop with signals how far that batter is, so whether they need to move to the base or not. They can tell the pitcher whether there's somebody on first base is trying to steal. So the person who actually has the most visibility, and I would argue is probably the smartest and most powerful person on the baseball field, is that catcher. They have to understand the game. They're giving signals to all the other players. They're telling which player to move in, which player to move out. They're telling everyone what's going on in the field. And to me, that's the role of cybersecurity. We have to stop thinking that, okay, we're trying to get the outs, we're trying to hit the batter. No, we're the catcher behind the plate that's basically looking at the field, calling the plays, and making sure everyone has the information they need to effectively do their job, because that's what a real catcher does. A real catcher is making sure that the pitcher and the shortstop and the first baseman have the data they need so they can effectively do their jobs and do the plays and get the outs.
It's a very good point. It's actually a great analogy that I think everyone can kind of understand the scope of, right? Because it's true. Everyone else on the baseball field has some sort of hindrance in what they're looking at. except for the catcher, whose job
Yeah.
is basically from a physical standpoint over once the ball is hit, but communicatively can see the rest of the field, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You have 8 players that are looking one direction, and you have one player that was looking the opposite direction.
Right.
So, and people sometimes fail to recognize how powerful that is, because it's all about framing and perspective. And if you have one person that's looking out and everyone else is looking in, that person becomes very valuable to all those other players.
Right, right. Very cool. So, I touched a little bit on an emerging tech with the behavioral biometrics. Wondering from your perspective, is there any on your radar emerging tech coming out that you feel can be a game changer in the field? Because I know part of my passion for cybersecurity and getting out of a sort of mundane day-to-day thing is looking at new tech and how it's going to affect the field. So, is there anything on your radar currently that you see coming out?
AI, digital twins. I mean, this is my obsession right now, is the idea of utilizing AI. And we'll just pick ChatGPT, or you can use Gronk 3, or you can use DeepSeek, whatever your favorite engine is.
Yeah.
But one of the things I do, and when I say this, it sort of freaks people out a little bit. And then when it sinks in, it makes a lot of sense. When I wake up in the morning, I sort of wake up, brush my teeth, sort of have my coffee, check the email, but then I spend 30 minutes brainstorming with my digital twin. So I actually created an AI model and I fed it. It has all my books, it has all my articles, it has everything I've written, and it knows how I think and act and operate. And I sit there in the morning and I go, okay, I want you to look at my calendar from yesterday, because I put everything in my calendar. So if I'm late to a meeting, I put it in a calendar. When my meetings are, I put my mood. I have an Aura ring that tracks sort of my activity level, my heart rate. So I am huge on data.
Yeah.
So my digital twin knows how I felt during the day, what my heart rate was, what my stress level was. And I actually asked my digital twin, hey, can you look at the last 24 hours and notice any trends? Notice any things, notice any issues. And one of the things that came up with this morning is, Eric, you are overbooking yourself. You are putting your meetings, you're trying to fit too much into a day. And you're, in essence, overstressing yourself, your team, and your assistants, because the reality is most of your meetings that are scheduled for 30 minutes go 40 minutes. And if you're scheduling meetings every 30 minutes, you're inadvertently late. And I hate being late.
Right.
And you're stressing yourself out, and then you're causing this approach to go in. So what I learned is, okay, even though I don't like it, I put a 30-minute buffer between every meeting. So if a meeting is supposed to be 30 minutes, I put a 30-minute buffer at the end. If a meeting is supposed to be an hour, I get a 30-minute buffer. So now when you look at my schedule and the way my assistant's doing it, she now adds 30-minute buffers, which in my mind is such a waste of time. Like I think, because like 30 minutes means I'm just going to goof off, I'm going to do things, and I'm wasting time. But the reality is we need time to reset. We need time to think. We need time to regroup. So now what I did today, which was pretty crazy, is after I get done with a meeting, I have a 30-minute buffer. So I get a little food, I drink some water, and I sit down for 15 minutes and I just sort of think. I just sort of regroup. People call it meditation. I call it thinking time. People call it power naps, whatever you want. But now after every meeting, I give myself 15 minutes to sort of just reset, rethink, and refocus. And all of a sudden, that changes everything. I'm so much more productive. I'm so much more focused. So this idea of what if we actually use AI to be our tout, our coach, to be our shrink, to be our monitor, where it's watching and monitoring us, and we ask it questions. Okay, you're seeing and looking what I'm doing. What can I do better? Well, one of the other themes I love doing is when I give keynotes, I'll go in and say, okay, read all my books. What is really my big theme? What is my big message that I'm trying to get? And it goes, Eric, your big message, and that's how I came up with security as a business enabler. I would have never came up with that on my own, but my digital twin was able to look at and see patterns quicker and faster and better than me. So to me, AI is something that can change our lives. However, what terrifies me about it is if these digital twins become so good, you don't need Eric anymore. Because now, here's the reality. What if my digital twin thinks and acts like me? So now, if I'm in a meeting and my employee or my child has a question, hey, how should I handle this? And they can ask my digital twin, and it gives an answer that is good as the answer I give because it's trained on my knowledge. They don't need to talk to me because guess what? I'm not available 24/7. I get stressed out. I get emotional. I can sometimes have an attitude, but I can sometimes not be the most pleasant person to deal with. But guess what? My digital twin is always there, always personable, always answering questions. So now the reality is, if now I created a better version of me that's not emotional, that's solely focused on giving answers and solutions, then at what point does that sort of make me less important or obsolete? And then we get to this reality where these movies, where basically the AI or the robots take over from humans, actually starts to become a reality pretty quickly. So that's what scares me is we're so focused on this technology. If we don't step back and realize the security risks and exposures and start limiting and controlling how we use AI, we could actually get to a really scary place in 10 to 15 years.
Right. Yeah. And you know what that brings to mind of I saw, I don't remember how long ago it was now, probably in the last year or so, where there was governments trying to slow down the process of AI and find out how to pass bills so that we could take a step back. And it's an interesting thought process because with technology, once you reach certain levels and you push past boundaries, you can't go backwards anymore, right?
Mhm.
It's already in the hands of the people. You can't take it away. And so this is progressing really fast, and there are a lot of dangers if we don't understand how to keep it within a helm. Even some of the stories I see coming out about trying to decipher AI videos and trying to tell real from fake. I wonder from a court perspective how that starts to play. Is
Mhm.
that going to start to become a defense of that's not prove to me that that's me and not AI in the video? And then if we can't use video as evidence anymore, then we're taking some significant steps backwards, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and that's the one thing I always tell everyone is shredders don't exist in digital space. And what I mean by that is when I worked for the government, and remember that this was in the 90s before tech, we had shredders to shred classified information. So if I wrote out a document or I had a piece of paper that had classified information or sensitive data on it, that was the only instance of it.
Right.
If I went and I put it in a shredder or I put it in a burn bag, it no longer existed. There was one instance of it. But now here's the scary part. If I, instead of taking a pen and writing it on a piece of paper and creating one instance of it that I can shred, if I go into my iPad and I type that up on my notepad and I close out the app, instantly it exists in hundreds of locations. Because guess what? As soon as I put it in digital form, it gets stored on my iPad. It also gets backed up to the cloud. And guess what? Those cloud servers are replicated. So if any server goes down, it's there. So now that piece of paper now exists in hundreds of spots. And the reality is it can't be destroyed or removed. And that's the scary part is digital evidence lasts forever. Physical evidence can be controlled and destroyed. And if we don't understand that difference and recognize there is some information that we should never put in a computer, there is some information that we should never type in digital form. There is some information that, guess what, should be written on a piece of paper that can be burnt. And we don't, we've lost fact of that. I even am guilty of this sometimes. And until we recognize that computers are for some, not everything, and paper still has value, we're going to be in a very scary place for a long time.
I think that's an important piece. We get so used to getting integrated into technologies, and there are use cases for things that just shouldn't be a part of it. I think we need to start going down that path of thinking that really isn't common thought right now, right?
Yep.
A point I wanted to make about the generative AI stuff that you brought up. How do you feel about the security risk in using the Gen AI? Because so you said, you put a lot of data into there, and it's very efficient at telling you what you should and shouldn't do, which is cool. And as someone who I'm an athlete, and I use my Garmin watch, and I'm constantly looking at all the different data sets. I love being able to take a look at heart rates and sleep patterns and all these different things, which would be great to have in a Gen AI, and have it even better tell me efficiently what I should be changing. But at what point, do we have to worry about putting massive sets of data about ourselves into these Gen AI models? And what comes to mind to that, even though it's a little bit different, is the recent news of 23andMe going bankrupt, right? So all these people have trusted this corporation and given it its DNA, and now that DNA is likely going to be sold off to who knows where. So where do we have to be careful about how much data we're putting into these things?
So what it comes down to is a simple question. If you're using apps or third party to capture data, we have to recognize that data is not private. So I got to the point where I didn't use it for a long time. So the Aura ring that I'm wearing is fairly new.
Okay.
Because for the longest time, I did not want my personal health information to be public. But the reality is there's a huge benefit. If I can know my heart rate during the day, and I can know my readiness and my sleep and other factors, that is useful data and useful information. But I basically got to the point where I'm like, okay, is the benefit worth the risk?
Right.
And what it comes down to, and this is what not a lot of people do, is you got to ask two questions. Not what is the value and benefit, but what is the risk and exposure? So when I finally got an Aura ring, I basically had this conversation with myself. What is the value and benefit of having sleep data, heart rate data? Really beneficial. Because now I can see if my eating is on point. I can see things that stress me out. I can see things that I need to eliminate from my diet. It's going to give me great visibility. However, other people are going to have access to it. Other people are going to understand and know my data. Is the benefit worth the risk?
Right.
And to me, it is. It is worth the risk. But I realize that my health information, my general information about heart rate and others, is not private.
Right.
It is public, open information. And as long as we recognize and accept that, we're okay. But then you get like to the 23andMe example. I think many people, if they went in and said, okay, my genetic information, my genetic data, my weaknesses and strengths and all those, I don't want public. So maybe I shouldn't have access to it. Maybe I should go and not do it online. Maybe I shouldn't send away and use a service like 23andMe. Or what a lot of people didn't realize is you could, after you got your results, tell 23andMe to delete your data. Like a lot of people did not know that. That's where California is now recommending all their citizens to actually go and tell 23andMe, delete my information, delete my data. But people did not realize that was an option. They did not realize that was something that they could do. So it's one of these things where we just have to be more educated and realize, okay, using a service like 23andMe is great. But after I get the information, what I should do is download it locally, secure it on an encrypted drive that only I have access to, and then go to the service and say, please delete all my information from all your records so it doesn't publicly exist anymore. And if we add in those additional steps, now I think we have a balance where the technology can benefit us, but we also have privacy. But until we're educated and realize those exposures, and that's what I'm trying to do, is educate people on the dangers so they can make better decisions and better protect their information. Until we cross that bridge, we're having this issue where really privacy is a train that's leaving the station and not coming back unless we start taking control of our personal data.
Yeah. And, I think that education piece is huge because, like you said, if you are taking a calculated risk, you understand what's at stake. And, maybe you make the decision that this convenience or this information is is worth the potential security risk, like you do with the Aura Ring or like I do with a Garmin watch, then at least you're making an informed decision. Whereas I think for the general masses, we don't understand where our data is going or what privacy risks there are. And honestly, I think one of the situations that brought this to light first was the Cambridge Analytica Facebook scandal, right? Because
Yep.
I don't think anybody really had any idea what was happening to their data on social media. And even to now, I don't know that after people really take a good look at it, but it at least expose what those risks are.
Exactly. Yep. But that's the thing, is how quickly we forget. Like, Cambridge Analytica should have been a wake up call. I mean, that should have caused major shifts in how we do things. But unfortunately, because it wasn't really publicized and people really didn't understand it, people sort of forgot about it. And now we're making these same mistakes over and over again. So the question is, how many more of these Cambridge Analytica or 23andMe's do we have to have, and before we start making new laws, new changes, and new regulations on how we operate and work with technology?
Yeah, and that's what I was going to ask you about next is when do we start holding the companies accountable? That's the missing link to me that I don't understand. Why do we have to be so cognizant about where our data is going, and instead why don't we hold the companies accountable for the security risk that they should be thinking about when holding this sensitive data, right?
Yeah. And to me, I think it's one where we really need to step back and say, this is an area where the government needs to step in. Because do you realize we are one of the few countries in the world that doesn't have federal laws on privacy, that doesn't have federal laws on cyber? You look at Europe, they have GDPR. Australia has their laws. North Korea has their laws. Russia has laws. The United States right now, most of our privacy laws are based on California and New York. They're actually at a state level. So the question is, and I think this is the huge win, and I think where the current administration, if they sort of align correctly, can really go down in the history books, is yes, government efficiency is important and the things they're doing are great. But I think if the current administration really wants to build a legacy, they would be the administration that actually passed federal laws on data privacy. Because here's the reality. We need to heal between the two parties. Like, there's too much fighting, there's too much anger. And here's the coolest part. Cybersecurity is not political. Cybersecurity is bipartisan. So if we want an area where the Democrats and Republicans can actually heal the nation and work together and show the people that we can actually be on the same side, cybersecurity is the perfect playbook. It's the perfect opportunity. It's a win-win for everybody. There's really no negative. And we really need to get Congress and the White House to start passing federal laws on cybersecurity. And then we can hold companies liable. But the problem now is, how can we hold companies liable when there's no standard and no regulation on what they need to do?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I'm actually out of Canada, but all of what you said relates back to here too. We're about to have an election. It's going to be very important. I think it's going to be one of the most important, elections we have in a long time, and around security totally needs to be addressed.
Exactly. And that's sort of, so yeah, to sort of summarizing, sort of my big theme that I encourage everyone listening and I'm doing is, we need to start raising awareness, recognizing that cybersecurity is something that needs to be integrated into our lives, and that cybersecurity can be fun and exciting. Because if all of a sudden people view cyber as an enabler and something that helps their lives and needs to be integrated in as opposed to a burden, then I think we can start to all work together and shift the mindset and actually start protecting and securing our information.
Right, it's a good point, and it reminded me of where I wanted to go. That the education piece is so important, because even in our government now, not a lot of people understand the value, right? So getting the new generation to understand is going to be really important, so that we can pass those laws in the future, right?
Exactly. Yep.
Cool. So you didn't touch on it too much in your career, but I'd like to understand a little bit from you, what got you into wanting to write books, and what is the process behind it's just great to have thoughts and ideas, but how do you formulate those into an actual book that gets published?
So the big reason for writing books is, I love to help people. Like I said, I truly believe I'm here to secure cyberspace. And my philosophy in life is the best way to live a fruitful, happy life is giving, is helping others. So what I try to do is whenever I meet somebody, whether it's on a podcast like this, whether it's in a job interview, or whether it's just in a supermarket, I always want to leave them better than before they met me. And the best way you do that is giving knowledge and giving information. And what I realized is when I was teaching and on stages, there's some people that can't come to my classes. There's some people that can't go to the arenas where I'm speaking. So I need to have a method to give them the information that they can get from their home. And a book is the best way of doing it. To me, books are the best gifts you can give back. It's how you leave a legacy. It's how you help. It's how you share information. Now, most people get so overwhelmed because they're like, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. Here's the reality. If you just captured your life, there's so much value there. There's so much value that you have that you don't realize. So what I do is I actually can write a book. I'm writing a book right now. I don't know what it is, but what I do is I am very big on capturing and putting my thoughts down. So what I do is like after this webinar, every day, whenever I have thoughts or ideas, I actually just put them into notes. So I'm just capturing all these different notes. And then every week I start organizing them together. And I start putting them into themes and putting them into issues. And then what happens over time is I naturally get to a point where I'm like, oh, here's a concept. And I actually have 10 big areas in this concept. And under 10 of those, I have 8 sub-thoughts. And under each of those 8, there's 3 or 4 bullets. That's a book.
Right.
So now when I go in to write, the writing process is actually very quick. So the way I write a book is I can essentially write about 30 pages in 8 hours. So most people can write about 3 to 5 pages. But here's the thing. What is your learning style? Some people like writing, some people like talking, some people like audio. I love talking. I love doing video. So the way I write a book is I will go in and I'll be like, okay, I have 2 hours. And I'm going to look at one of those sections that I wrote with the bullet points. And I basically either print it out or write it on an index card. And then I go for a walk and I just talk for 2 hours. So I'm like, okay, here's the bullet. And I'm letting the bullet points guide me. And I'm basically creating a 2-hour dictation. Then what's great now with AI and like Otter, it auto dictates it. So then I have it written up.
Yeah.
I then can go in and either have somebody edit it, or I can now have my digital twin basically clean up the grammar, create it. And then I now have a really nice book chapter. So now all of a sudden I'm writing books and I'm like, and people are like, how do you do it? I'm like, it's just part of my life. Like it wasn't a burden. It wasn't a stress. Cause guess what? If every day I just capture thoughts, that's just how I live.
Yeah.
And every day I just write 5 pages because that's just how I live. And every day I go for walks and I talk to myself and I auto record. And it's now sort of part of my life where it actually is things that add joy and release stress and make me happy. Now, all of a sudden, and I'm just writing books every moment of every day. Now, do I publish all of them? Not necessarily. Do I put them all out there? But the reality is I'm now just constantly writing books. And then when it gets to the point where there's the right need, I then find a publisher and we publish the book. So it's not writing a book. I treat writing books or sharing knowledge more like eating, exercising, and breathing, where you're just integrating it into your life as opposed to a stress factor that, oh, I have to take 2 months to write a book.
Right. You found an efficient way to do it. I think of podcasting in a similar way. I don't force podcasts to come out. I wait until I have a line of thinking that I'd like to express or talk about, and then I bring it onto the podcast. It becomes very easy talking, and I learn from myself bringing it out. Like you said, I think when I watch other podcasts, the first thing I try and do is talk to somebody who I know is interested in the same subject and kind of speak it back, and that kind of codes it into my brain from that point forward.
Yep. Excellent.
Cool. So the other thing I wanted to talk about in your career that you hadn't mentioned yet was the expert witness piece. Can you talk a little bit about what you can talk about, what goes into that?
Sure. So expert witness is where when there's litigation, essentially around like patents or technology where two parties disagree, it basically will often involve very complex technology. So like if there's a medical lawsuit or there's a technical lawsuit or there's a data breach, it involves very complex topics that judges and juries are not trained on.
Right.
So an expert is basically somebody that's a teacher. I'm a natural born teacher. I love helping people. So it's natural for me to go into expert witness. So basically what you do as an expert witness is you take very complex topics and you explain them in ways that people that are not trained in the field can understand and comprehend. So it's basically just another form of being a teacher. So I would love at some point to sort of be a professor at like a top university. The problem is my travel schedule and how dynamic I am. I just can't commit to being in one place for 15 weeks, right? It doesn't work. So to me, expert witness is a way that I can be a college professor, that I can be a teacher, that I can share knowledge, but do it in a much more flexible, dynamic manner, as opposed to working at a university and teaching a class 2 or 3 times a week.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And that also reminds me that there is quite a big problem in the skill gap, I think, from a teaching perspective, because we talked a little bit about education, how important it is, but I've run into similar problems even in my current role with Canadian Nuclear Labs, where they've built a great training program, but the people capable of training this at a high level are too invaluable in other areas, right?
Yep.
So the skill gap hurts the education piece. So I'm glad that you've found sort of other ways to educate with the books, and even on podcasts and stuff too, right? You're finding ways to spread the information, which is super cool. So we talked a little bit about emerging tech and what could be coming next to be helpful in a cybersecurity world. Is there anything on top of mind that you think is coming next from the other side? So any specific threats from the hacking perspective that you think we should potentially be worried about that are on the horizon?
I mean, I think the biggest threat right now is data leakage. I mean, we are just generating so much data and so much information, and we're not even sure where it's stored, where it's being put, and where it's being located. And all this data and all this information is invaluable to the adversary.
Right.
The more they can build profiles and understand how we think and how we operate, the more they can exploit us. So it's one of those where I'm definitely not saying that we should give up on tech. I mean, I joke sometimes with my friends. There's days where when I get to Friday afternoon, I look at my friends and I'm like, I'm going to Pennsylvania and becoming Amish. Like I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy and nuts, but I mean, there's days where the idea of just sort of having a simple life, having candles and reading and having a fire and raising horses and, with no tech, no computers, no TV, like that just sounds amazing to me. And that's why, a different topic, but I'm big into digital detox and sort of taking breaks and stuff like that. So I'm not saying we should do that, but I'm saying that we probably need to step back and say, okay, are we over dependent on tech? Are we over dependent on generating too much data and too much information? And we need to start scaling back and generating less data and less information, because at the speed we're going now and the amount of data that we're creating, we are just creating the ultimate perfect storm for adversaries to exploit, hurt us, and cause damage.
Right. I think that's an interesting perspective to have from someone whose careers relied on tech. So I think that adds, validity to it, because obviously you could have an easy bias to want more tech, right? For the career that you have. So for someone like you to say, maybe we need to take a little bit of a step back, I think people should really be paying attention to someone like you saying that.
Yep.
So pivot a little bit, but is there anything in particular you feel that standard corporations right now get wrong with their cybersecurity stack? There's the standard firewall systems and maybe mapping and vulnerability assessments, but is there any glaring hole that you think people don't pay enough attention to in the standard corporate environment?
I think the biggest hole is the baselining of data and anomaly detection. Like simple example, one of the best security measures, I use this all the time, I've detected so many attacks doing it, is simply tracking the number of drop packets in your firewall and looking for anomalies. Because here's the reality. When you're being attacked, when somebody's trying to break into your organization from the outside, the number of drop packets has to change. Because they're going to try to break in, they're not going to get in right away, and they're going to flood your data. So if you are just doing something as simple as real time, just tracking the number of drop packets in your firewall, it's going to go up and down, up and down, up and down. And all of a sudden, you have a spike that increases by more than 10%. There's a real good probability that that's an attack. Now, it might be a false positive, but I can tell you this. There is no way an attacker can break into a system and keep your drop packet steady state. That has to alter, that has to deviate. So if we're watching just simple metrics, simple data, something like just looking at drop packets coming into a firewall, and we're looking for deviations, and that's what we're researching and analyzing, we can now detect and catch attacks so much quicker and so much faster and minimize the overall damage. So it's one of those where I think we're trying to make it so complicated with so much tech and throw so much money at the problem, when if we just go back to simple, basic metrics, like you go to a hospital, you go to a doctor's office, what do they always do? They'll hook you up to a heart rate monitor.
Right.
And any hospital that you go to, what do you see on the patient? Why? It's simple, but guess what? It's the best indicator of health issues. If something is going wrong with your body, your heart rate is going to fluctuate. So if your heart rate starts to drop or starts to increase, you will have nurses and doctors in your room so quick because they know that's one of the best simple indicators. Now, yes, then they'll do blood work, they'll do all those detailed things, but all they're monitoring at patients is a simple single metric, a heartbeat. What if we did that approach with cybersecurity? Now, I'm not saying drop packets is the right one, that works for me, but what if we just have a simple heartbeat, a simple drop packets, and that's what we monitor and track, and that's what we look for deviations on? All of a sudden, cyber becomes so much easier and simpler for the defense and so much harder for the offense.
Right. So basically from a high level, paying more attention to baseline metrics so that you can compare and contrast against them instead of looking at all of the services that you can add in between. If you just look at the basics and be able to go back and forth between them, you've put yourself at a good start.
Exactly.
Gotcha. Okay. In essence of time, I'll kind of start to wrap it up here, but I had another question that came to mind that I wanted your take on. How do you feel about a lot of these technologies are made overseas, especially from the chip perspective? What can we do about preventing backdoors from companies, especially the most relevant being China? That's where most of the chips are made, or Taiwan, same kind of area. Is the only way to do that to create the product locally, or are there other ways to protect ourselves from potential backdoors?
So the reality is, whether we like it or not, we accepted that risk. Because take any tech we're using. Take your cell phone, take your iPad, take your TV, take anything that has data and information. And if you look at the back, very little technology says made in the USA. So whether we like it or not, we've accepted the risk. So to me, well, yeah, if we wanted to, we could go in and do stringent inspections and things like that. But the reality is, if the Chinese or anybody who's making these technologies want to, it would be very easy.
Right.
I mean, so to answer your question is we could go in and we could do spot checking of the tech and do really detailed analysis to look for backdoors in reality. But here's the question. So if we find it, what do we do?
Right.
So let's say that the chipset that's made in China that goes in every single iPhone and every single iPad. What if we determine it has a backdoor? Does Apple shut down?
Right. No.
Does Apple stop selling? No. So the reality is, yes, we could look at moving things into the United States and doing chip inspection and everything else. But what we have to recognize is we've accepted that risk. And the question we have to ask ourselves is, if it's an unacceptable risk, how much money are we willing to spend to fix it? And to me, that's the big questions we should be debating out there now is, if we really think that's a big risk, which I think it is, then the United States should be spending money on moving chip manufacturing into the United States over the next 20 years. Not being critical, and I understand why they did it, but I'm sitting here going, during COVID, why in the world did we spend $2 trillion on physical infrastructure that is archaic and not going to be used in the future?
Right.
Why aren't we spending it on building chip manufacturing plants within the United States? Why aren't we focused on long-term problems over the next 20, 30 years, as opposed to these short-term issues? So you're right. If we view it as an unacceptable risk, we need to accept that, but it's going to be a $2 or $3 trillion investment to do that. But those are the type things that we need Congress focusing on, not nitpicking and fighting over these silliness.
Yeah, I totally agree. Okay, well, that's really all the questions I've got for you. Maybe I'll let I'll give you the open mic if you want to send any sort of message on cybersecurity in general that maybe you think people should be focusing on, or just know about the field in general.
I mean, to me, the big thing is we need creative thinkers. So if you're interested in being creative and coming up with new ideas, new solutions, and new information, definitely jump into cybersecurity. I mean, to me, it is the funnest field I've ever worked in. And I'll sort of just leave with sort of little personal advice, which is the best way to run your life, the best way to run your business, the best way to be efficient in cybersecurity is to let data drive decisions, not emotions. Use the data to guide you. Use the data to look for problems, look for issues. And if you're letting data drive decisions, like looking for anomalies, tracking heart rate, and doing things like that, all of a sudden your life becomes optimized and you're focused on the real problems and not the symptoms.
Love it. Great message. Awesome.